My name is Clarissa, and I'm 34 years old. I live in a small town tucked between the Oregon hills, where everyone knows everyone else, and life moves at a quiet, predictable pace. I've always been the kind of person who keeps to herself, simple job, small circle, nothing too extravagant. But everything shifted after my grandmother passed away last spring. She was the last of her generation, a woman full of mystery and wisdom. Her cottage sat at the edge of town, creaky and overgrown with ivy, like a place frozen in time. When her will was read, I was surprised to learn she'd left the cottage and everything in it to me. It felt like both a gift and a burden. The house needed repairs, and sorting through decades of belongings felt endless. I remember the smell most vividly, a mixture of lavender sachets and dust. Each room was a treasure chest of memories: porcelain dolls with fading faces, embroidered cushions, and photo albums yellowed with age. But there was one thing she'd always mentioned in her soft, deliberate way. "Don't throw away the wooden box in the attic, Clarissa. Promise me that." I'd always nodded, not giving it much thought. Weeks passed after her funeral before I finally decided to clean the attic. The air up there was heavy with dust, and the wooden boards creaked beneath my feet. I brushed away cobwebs and pushed aside old quilts when I spotted a wooden box tucked behind an old rocking chair. It was small, carved with a faint floral design, and its hinges had rusted with time. I carried it down to the kitchen table and opened it carefully. Inside, dozens of old coins glimmered faintly in the afternoon light. Some were silver, others copper, all worn smooth by time. I turned them over one by one, admiring the faded engravings. They were beautiful, but I had no idea what they were worth, if anything at all. I called my cousin Emily later that evening. She was always the practical one, sharp-tongued but knowledgeable about antiques. I told her about the box, and she laughed through the phone. "Clarissa, come on. Grandma was sentimental, not rich. She probably collected those from flea markets." Her words stung a little, but she might have been right. Grandma wasn't wealthy, and she'd lived simply her whole life. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the coins meant something. I remembered her stories about her father, who had traveled across the country during the Great Depression, collecting oddities and relics to sell or trade. Maybe these coins were part of that history. That night, I set the box aside on the mantel and went to bed. But sleep wouldn't come easily. My mind kept drifting back to those coins, their weight, the sound they made when I sifted through them, like tiny whispers from another time. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window, catching the edge of one coin I'd left out. Something about it looked different, a subtle gleam, a distinct engraving that set it apart from the rest. I picked it up and held it close. It was heavier than the others, with an intricate design that seemed more detailed, more deliberate. The image showed a crowned figure surrounded by fine lettering, though most of it was too faded to read. I rubbed it gently with a soft cloth, careful not to damage it, and caught a glimpse of what looked like the year 1794. My pulse quickened. I didn't know much about coins, but something about that date seemed important. I placed it beside the others and stared at the contrast. The rest looked ordinary, but this one had a quiet kind of majesty. My curiosity got the better of me, so I grabbed my phone and started searching online. I typed in 1,794 Liberty coin and scrolled through the results. Page after page mentioned rarity, historical significance, and astronomical values, some even reaching hundreds of thousands of dollars. Of course, I wasn't naive. The internet is full of exaggerations and fake listings, so I tried to temper my excitement. Still, my hands trembled as I held that coin again. It didn't look like a reproduction. The texture, the wear, it felt too authentic. That afternoon, I took the box with me to the small antique shop downtown. The owner, Kara, was a friend from school and someone I trusted. She greeted me warmly, wiping her hands on her apron as I placed the box on her counter. "You're always finding the most interesting things, Clarissa," she teased. When I showed her the coins, she chuckled. "These? They're neat, but don't get your hopes up. Most people bring me similar ones every week, commemorative stuff or replicas. I'll take a look, though." She examined a few with a magnifier, nodding nonchalantly. "Sorry, hun, I don't see anything rare here. Maybe a few dollars worth to collectors, if that. I forced a smile, thanked her, and turned to leave, trying not to let the disappointment show. Maybe Emily was right after all, maybe I'd just built up false hope over nothing. But as I picked up the box, an older man standing near the counter cleared his throat. His voice was calm but steady. "Excuse me, miss," he said, pointing toward the coin I'd been most drawn to. "Would you mind if I took a closer look at that one?" I hesitated for a moment, then handed it over. His hands trembled slightly as he held it under the light, his eyes narrowing as he examined the edges and faint engravings. There was something different in his expression, not amusement, not skepticism, but recognition. He looked up at me with a strange intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. And in that quiet, tense moment, I knew this was no ordinary coin. I couldn't get that one coin out of my head. Even after I left the antique shop that day, my thoughts kept circling back to it, the weight, the color, the strange look on that old man's face. He hadn't said much, only that it wasn't something he'd seen in years, and that I should keep it safe. I'd tried to ask him what he meant, but he just smiled faintly, handed it back, and left the shop before I could say another word. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the way he'd studied the coin as if he recognized it but didn't want to reveal too much. By morning, curiosity got the best of me again. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and pulled out Grandma's old magnifying glass from her sewing drawer. Under the morning light, the coin's details seemed to come alive. I noticed the design more clearly now, the faint profile of a woman with flowing hair and a small crown above her head. Around the edge, I could make out the words Liberty and 1,794. But there was something else, a tiny, almost hidden mark beneath the bust, like an initial or symbol that wasn't part of any regular mint design. I typed the words into my phone again, this time more carefully. 1,794 Liberty dollar coin markings. Immediately, dozens of results appeared. Articles, collector forums, and auction listings. One headline caught my attention: the 1,794 flowing hair silver dollar, the first coin struck by the U.S. Mint. My heart skipped a beat as I read about how it represented the dawn of American currency. It said that only a few hundred were ever made, and fewer than 200 were still known to exist. Some were valued at hundreds of thousands, even millions, depending on condition and rarity. But my excitement faltered when I looked at the images. The coins online looked similar to mine, but not identical. The font was slightly different, and the crown above the Liberty head wasn't supposed to be there. I frowned, comparing them side by side. Could mine be a fake? A reproduction someone had made years later? Still, that odd mark below the portrait nagged at me. I decided I needed another opinion, someone with more experience than Kara. She was kind, but her expertise was mostly in furniture and local memorabilia. So, I drove back to her shop anyway, hoping maybe the old man might return. When I arrived, Kara was rearranging a display of vintage clocks. She gave me a knowing smile when she saw the box in my hands. "Back again? Don't tell me you're still thinking about those coins." "I just can't stop wondering," I admitted, feeling a little foolish. "You said they were replicas, but that man yesterday seemed to think otherwise." She raised an eyebrow. "The old guy with the tweed jacket? He's in here all the time. Retired, I think. Always poking around for collectibles, probably just wanted to make conversation." Still, I asked if she could take another look. She humored me, adjusting her glasses and inspecting the coin again. "It's got good weight," she said, tapping it lightly against the counter. "But honestly, Clarissa, these things are made by the thousands. I've seen exact copies sold online for $20. Her words deflated me. I picked the coin up and turned it over one last time, trying to see it as just a trinket, a piece of old metal with no meaning. But before I could put it away, I heard that same calm, gravelly voice from behind me. "You really shouldn't dismiss that coin so easily." I turned, and there he was again, the same old man from before, his eyes sharp and curious. Kara gave him a playful smirk. "Mr. Brenner, you're the expert now?" He ignored her tone, stepping closer to me. "May I?" he asked, extending his hand. I hesitated, then passed him the coin. He turned it under the light, examining it for a long, silent minute. Then he looked directly at me. "Where did you say you got this?" "It belonged to my grandmother," I said. "She had a whole box of old coins in her attic." His brow furrowed. "And she never told you where they came from?" I shook my head. He nodded slowly. "Then I'll tell you, this isn't a replica. At least, not any I've ever seen. The crown marking, the faint letter beneath Liberty's chin that's not standard mint work. It's something else." Kara rolled her eyes. "Come on, Mr. Brenner. You've said that before. Half the stuff people bring in here looks old. Doesn't make it real." But he didn't respond to her. He handed the coin back to me gently, his tone low and deliberate. "If I were you, I'd have this professionally examined. There's a place in Portland, the Heritage Auction House. Ask for Dr. Pennington. Tell him Richard Brenner sent you." His name Brenner stuck in my mind. Something about his seriousness unsettled me. Before I could ask more, he gave me a small nod and walked out of the shop, his cane tapping rhythmically against the floor. Kara sighed. "He's harmless, Clarissa. Just one of those old collectors who see treasure in everything." Maybe she was right, but something about his conviction lingered. That night, as I sat alone at Grandma's old kitchen table, I found myself researching the Heritage Auction House. The photos on their website showed rooms full of gold, paintings, and priceless artifacts. It looked intimidating, the kind of place that wouldn't give someone like me the time of day. But the thought of Grandma's voice, the way she'd insisted I never throw that box away, pushed me forward. I placed the coin back into its velvet pouch and tucked it safely into my purse. I didn't know what I was walking into, but I knew I had to see it through. Because somehow, deep down, I could feel that this coin was about to change everything. The old man's hands trembled as he held the coin. Even now, the image of him, Richard Brenner, stayed burned into my mind. I didn't know much about him, only that he seemed certain my coin wasn't just another replica. His conviction had unsettled me, but it had also planted a seed of hope I couldn't ignore. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept replaying his words. This might not be a replica. The crown marking isn't standard mint work. I sat up more than once, tempted to take the coin out again, to stare at it under the dim lamp as if it would whisper its secrets. By morning, I made up my mind. I was going to Portland. I called Kara to let her know. She laughed and told me not to waste my time or gas. "You'll drive all the way there just for someone to tell you it's worth pocket change," she said. Maybe she was right, but something in my gut told me there was more to this than just curiosity. Before leaving, I stopped by the antique shop one last time, hoping to find Mr. Brenner again, maybe to ask how he knew Dr. Pennington. But when I arrived, Kara told me he hadn't come by that morning. She said he usually stopped in only once a week. I left my number with her in case he returned and asked for me, then got in my car and began the 2-hour drive north. The road wound through forested hills, fog clinging to the edges of the trees like a silent curtain. I couldn't help thinking of Grandma. She'd always loved collecting things, old postcards, teacups, even newspapers from the 1942. But she'd never mentioned coins. Why would she have such a rare one? And why the specific warning to never throw that box away? When I finally reached Portland, the Heritage Auction House stood like a piece of another world. A stately white building with marble pillars and banners, advertising historic artifacts and rare collections. I hesitated before walking in, clutching my purse a little tighter. Inside, everything gleamed. The floor was polished stone, and glass display cases lined the walls, filled with gold watches, jeweled brooches, and silver coins shining under soft spotlights. At the reception desk, a young woman greeted me with a polite but distant smile. "Good afternoon. Do you have an appointment?" No. I admitted. "I was told to come here by a Mr. Brenner. I wanted someone to take a look at something for me." Her smile faltered slightly. "We don't usually evaluate walk-ins, ma'am, but if you're here on Mr. Brenner's recommendation, I can see if someone's available." She disappeared through a side door, leaving me standing awkwardly in the lobby. Wealthy-looking people passed by, murmuring to each other as they admired the displays. I felt completely out of place in my faded jeans and worn jacket. After nearly half an hour, a tall man with gray hair and rimmed glasses emerged. "I'm Dr. Pennington," he said, extending his hand. "You mentioned Richard Brenner sent you?" I nodded, trying to steady my nerves. "Yes. He thought you might be interested in looking at a coin I found." He gestured for me to follow him down a quiet hallway lined with framed photographs of historical artifacts. We entered a small evaluation room with a bright overhead light and a single glass-topped table. I sat down, opened the box, and carefully placed the coin in front of him. He examined it silently for a long time, turning it over with gloved hands. Then, without looking up, he asked, "May I ask where this came from?" "It belonged to my grandmother," I said. "She passed away a few months ago and left me her things. This was in a box in her attic." He finally met my eyes. "You may not realize it, but this coin bears features that don't match any known public minting records. The design, it's familiar, but it has subtle differences. Especially this crown symbol here." He pointed to the faint marking above the head of Liberty. "That shouldn't exist on any American coin from 1794. My heart thudded. "So, does that mean it's fake?" "Not necessarily," he said. "In fact, the opposite might be true." He leaned back, choosing his words carefully. "Before official minting began in the late 18th century, there were what we call pattern coins. They were prototypes, experimental designs created before mass production. Some were never approved and destroyed, but occasionally, a few pieces slipped out, into private hands. If this is what I suspect it is, you might be holding a pre-federal prototype." The words hit me like a jolt. "You mean, one of a kind?" He nodded slightly. "Possibly. There are records of one such coin going missing from a private collection in the 1800s. It was rumored to exist but never recovered." My palms went clammy. "What do I do now?" He smiled faintly. "Leave it with us for a full evaluation. We'll run authenticity tests and contact National Archives if necessary. It'll take a few days." I hesitated, reluctant to let it out of my sight. "Will it be safe here?" "Absolutely," he assured. "Our vaults are secured and insured." As I left the building, I couldn't help feeling both lighter and more anxious. Something monumental was unfolding, something Grandma had perhaps known all along. When I returned home that evening, I found a message waiting on my answering machine. It was Kara's voice, slightly nervous. "Hey, Clarissa. That old man, Brenner? He stopped by again asking about you. He said to tell you, don't trust everyone who takes interest in the coin." Then he left. That's all he said. The message made my blood run cold. What did he mean? Don't trust who, the auction house? The appraisers? Or someone else entirely? I played the message again, trying to decipher the tone in her voice, the urgency in his words. And that's when I realized this coin wasn't just valuable, it was dangerous. I arrived at the Portland Heritage Auction House feeling completely out of place. The second time I walked through those glass doors, the polished air of sophistication felt heavier. Everything inside gleamed: the brass fixtures, the polished marble, the people. I'd dressed a little better, this time, hoping to blend in, but my nerves betrayed me with every shaky breath. Dr. Pennington had called me the night before, asking me to come in person. His tone was calm, almost too calm. He'd said, "We have some interesting findings, Miss Rivers. It's best we discuss them face to face." Interesting findings. That phrase had rolled around my mind all night, stirring both excitement and dread. At the reception desk, the same young woman greeted me with her professional smile. "Miss Rivers, Dr. Pennington is expecting you. Please, follow me." She led me through the quiet corridors, past rooms filled with glass displays. Each case held priceless artifacts, old manuscripts, sculptures, and gleaming coins worth more than my house. My stomach twisted as I realized that something I had once brushed off as old junk might actually belong among them. The evaluation room looked the same as before, sterile, white, and clinical. Dr. Pennington stood by the table, alongside another man in a gray suit I hadn't seen before. He was younger, sharper, with calculating eyes that scanned me as if assessing what kind of person would walk in with something like that coin. Miss Rivers, Doctor. Pennington began warmly. Thank you for coming. Please, have a seat. I sat down, clutching my purse nervously. You said you had news? He nodded and opened a folder on the table. Yes. We've completed preliminary testing on the coin you brought. Metallurgic analysis indicates that it's composed of early American silver alloy consistent with the late 18th century. The weight, edge pattern, and hand engraving all align with pre-Federal Mint practices. So, it's real? I asked quietly. The man in gray spoke before Pennington could answer. Authentic, yes, but that's not the full story. His voice carried the clipped tone of someone who preferred control. Your coin doesn't match any officially cataloged design, which means it could be a prototype or something even rarer. But because of that, it's also extremely sensitive. Ownership could become complicated. Complicated how? He smiled faintly. Artifacts of this kind often attract claims from collectors, museums, even the government. Everyone wants a piece of history. I felt my pulse quicken. It belonged to my grandmother. She left it to me. Dr. Pennington held up a hand. Don't worry, Miss Rivers. As long as there are no records proving it was stolen or transferred improperly, it's legally yours. That word stolen echoed in my head. I hadn't even considered that possibility. Could Grandma have come into possession of something that wasn't hers to begin with? I wanted to believe she wouldn't, but doubt began to creep in. Doctor. Pennington cleared his throat, bringing my attention back. We'd like to request permission to keep the coin under secure observation while we arrange for an independent authentication by the Numismatic Institute. If confirmed, it could be one of the earliest pattern coins ever discovered. I hesitated, unsure if I was making the right decision, but nodded. All right. I trust you. The man in gray smiled thinly. Excellent. You'll receive an official receipt for our custody records. He scribbled a signature and handed me a carbon copy slip. After signing the paperwork, I stood to leave. But before I could, Dr. Pennington leaned forward slightly. Miss Rivers, has anyone else expressed interest in this coin? Anyone unusual, perhaps? The question caught me off guard. Why do you ask? Just curiosity, he said quickly. It's not uncommon for word to spread once something like this surfaces. We've had collectors reach out already, asking about your item. My stomach dropped. Collectors? How could anyone know? He gave a small shrug. The numismatic world is well connected. But rest assured, we're keeping your identity confidential. I forced a polite nod, though my gut told me there was more to that than he was saying. When I finally left the building, I sat in my car for several minutes before turning the key. My heart was pounding. Everything about the meeting had felt professional, but there was an undercurrent of secrecy I couldn't ignore. As I drove back toward the highway, the clouds thickened, and a light rain began to fall. I kept replaying Dr. Pennington's question in my head. Has anyone else expressed interest? The only person who had warned me about trust was Richard Brenner. Had he known something I didn't? When I got home that evening, my phone was buzzing with missed calls, 3 from an unknown number and 1 from my cousin Emily. I hesitated before calling her back. Clarissa, she answered breathlessly. You won't believe what I just saw. Someone from the Heritage Auction House called me this afternoon. My body went rigid. What? Why would they call you? They said they were verifying family provenance. Some kind of ownership check for historical inheritance, she said. They asked about Grandma's estate and if I knew anything about her coin collection. My grip on the phone tightened. You didn't tell them anything, did you? I just said the coins were yours. I mean, they are, right? Her voice had a hint of something else, envy, maybe. Why? What's going on? I tried to steady my breathing. Nothing. Just don't talk to anyone else about it. Please. When I hung up, a strange unease settled over me. The Heritage Auction House wasn't supposed to contact anyone else, especially not my family. It felt invasive, and somehow calculated. That night, I double-checked that my doors and windows were locked. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd stepped into something much bigger than myself. I sat at Grandma's kitchen table again, her photograph beside me, and whispered, "What did you leave me, Grandma? What did you get me into?" Then, as I reached for my tea, something slid under the front door, a plain white envelope. My name was written on it in shaky handwriting. Inside was a single note. It read, "They're not telling you everything. Don't let them keep the coin. R.B." And that was the moment I realized I might have just handed over the only thing truly protecting me. They brought in the head curator, a man named Dr. Pennington. The following morning, I returned to the Heritage Auction House, letter still burning in my purse. I hadn't told anyone about it, not even Emily. Part of me wanted to confront them right away about the message, but I decided to stay calm and see how much they'd reveal on their own. The receptionist recognized me instantly and led me down the hall again. Dr. Pennington was waiting in the same evaluation room, this time with 2 assistants. A velvet tray sat on the table, the coin gleaming under bright light. For a second, I wondered if I was walking into something I couldn't control. "Miss Rivers," he greeted, motioning for me to sit. "We've completed our full analysis." He spoke with that same professional composure, but his eyes carried a quiet excitement. I have to admit, in all my years of work, I've never encountered a specimen quite like yours. I tried to sound casual. "So it's definitely real?" He nodded slowly. "Beyond any doubt. It's authentic, a pre-federal mint pattern, likely commissioned before the U.S. Mint was officially established. The details suggest it may have been handcrafted by a private engraver experimenting with coin designs in the late 1700s. My heart leapt. "So it's rare?" He chuckled softly. "Rare is an understatement, Miss Rivers. This coin might be unique. If so, it would be the only surviving piece of its kind in existence." I felt dizzy. The room seemed to close in around me. Unique, that word carried. Weight. The kind of weight that could change a life. But then, something in his tone shifted. "There's more," he said. The inscription along the rim, that faint crown symbol, we traced it to a series of prototype dies attributed to a private engraver named William Birch. Only 2 sets were ever made. Both were assumed destroyed in an early mint fire. I stared blankly. "But if this one survived?" He nodded. "Then it's a historical anomaly, possibly worth hundreds of thousands, maybe more. Hundreds of thousands." I could barely breathe. That kind of money could pay off debts, fix Grandma's cottage, maybe even buy a fresh start. But beneath the excitement was something else: unease. That letter from Richard Brenner echoed in my mind. "Don't let them keep the coin." I forced a steady tone. "So what happens now?" Dr. Pennington smiled kindly. "Well, the next step would be verification by the American Numismatic Association and then certification for auction. If you choose to sell, we'd be honored to host it. You could see a remarkable return, depending on bidding interest." I swallowed hard. "And if I don't want to sell?" His expression didn't change, but I caught the faintest flicker of disappointment in his eyes. "Of course, that's entirely your choice. Though, I should mention, with an artifact of this nature, keeping it privately can raise legal and insurance complications." There it was again, the subtle pressure. He made it sound like I had to sell just to avoid trouble. Before I could respond, one of his assistants leaned in and whispered something to him. He nodded, then looked back at me. "Actually, there's a gentleman waiting in our lobby. He's heard about your coin and asked if he might speak with you directly. He's a collector, quite reputable. He's made some impressive acquisitions over the years." My stomach turned. "How does he even know about this?" "I thought this was confidential." He hesitated. "Sometimes word travels faster than we intend. But if you'd rather not meet him, I completely understand." I clenched my hands in my lap. "No. That's fine. I'll hear what he has to say." A few minutes later, the door opened, and a tall man in an immaculate navy suit stepped inside. His silver cufflinks glinted as he extended his hand. "Miss Rivers, a pleasure. My name is Harold Keene. I represent several private collectors interested in early American coinage." His handshake was firm, His smile practiced. Everything about him felt rehearsed, smooth, confident, maybe too confident. I heard about your discovery, he continued. If you'll forgive my bluntness, I'd like to make a private offer before it ever reaches the auction block. I blinked. An offer? But it hasn't even been officially certified yet. Exactly, he said smoothly. That's why I can offer something compelling. I'm prepared to pay $250,000 in cash today, no delays, no paperwork. You'd walk away with a small fortune before anyone else even knows what you found. My heart pounded. $250,000, that was life-changing. But something in his voice felt off, like a sales pitch wrapped in a trap. Doctor. Pennington watched quietly, neither interrupting nor endorsing. That silence alone made me uneasy. Were they in this together? I'll need to think about it, I said finally. Keene smiled knowingly. Of course, just know that the more public this becomes, the more complicated it gets. Private collectors are discreet, the government isn't. He gave a courteous nod, then left as smoothly as he'd entered. When the door closed, I turned to Dr. Pennington. Did you invite him? He adjusted his glasses. We didn't disclose your identity, I assure you. Collectors have their ways of finding leads. It's the nature of this field. His calm tone only deepened my suspicion. Everything about this felt staged, like they'd been expecting me to fold under temptation. I stood, gathering my things. I think I'll take the coin back for now. He blinked. That's highly irregular. I'm not leaving it here again. My voice surprised even me, firm, certain. You said it's legally mine, then I'll decide what to do with it. He paused, then nodded reluctantly. Very well, Miss Rivers, but do be careful, people will come for it now. I tucked the coin safely into its pouch, thanked him curtly, and walked out. My hands trembled the entire drive home. When I arrived, Emily's car was already in my driveway. She leaned against it, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Word travels fast, huh? She said softly. I heard you found something special. Her tone made my stomach twist. And in that instant, I knew the real battle over Grandma's coin was only just beginning. News travels fast when money's involved. I learned that the hard way. The day after my meeting at the Heritage Auction House, my quiet little life erupted into chaos. Emily hadn't come by just to chat, she'd come fishing. She stood on my porch that morning, dressed in her work blazer and that same smug half-smile she always wore when she thought she knew more than I did. So, she began casually, are the rumors true? You really found a coin worth a fortune? I tried to play dumb. Rumors? She crossed her arms, cocking her head. Don't do that, Clarissa. The auction house called me. Something about verifying family inheritance. They said they were confirming provenance, that means ownership, right? I gritted my teeth. Yes, and that's been settled. Grandma's will left everything to me. Emily's smile faded just slightly, replaced by a practiced tone of concern. I'm not here to argue, I just think maybe we should handle this together. Grandma loved us both, don't you? Think it's only fair that we… No, I cut her off. Grandma made her wishes clear. The cottage, the belongings, they're mine. She sighed dramatically. You always were stubborn. Then her voice sharpened. You know, Clarissa, things like this can get messy if you don't handle them right. You could end up in legal trouble. I stared at her, realizing this wasn't about family sentiment, it was about greed. Are you threatening me? She blinked, all innocence again. Of course not. I'm just trying to protect what's rightfully ours. After she left, my house felt smaller somehow. Like the walls were closing in. I paced for hours, trying to decide if I should have just kept quiet about the whole thing. But it was too late, the coin was out in the open now. Between the auction house, the mysterious collector, and my family's sudden interest, it felt like I was standing in the center of a storm. 2 days later, things got worse. My phone buzzed with calls from relatives I hadn't heard from in years, Aunt Janet, Cousin Peter, even my uncle from California. Every call had the same undertone, curiosity disguised as concern. We heard about Grandma's collection. You should really make sure everything's fairly divided, Aunt Janet said sweetly. Fairly divided. The phrase made my stomach turn. None of them had lifted a finger to help Grandma when she was alive. Yet now they were all circling like vultures. By that evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I called Dr. Pennington to ask if he'd told anyone about the coin's discovery. He sounded surprised. Of course not. Our confidentiality policy is absolute. But Miss Rivers, the collector community has eyes everywhere. If even one person saw you here, word could spread. That wasn't comforting. I hung up and sat in silence, staring at the small wooden box on my table. The coins inside seemed to glimmer mockingly under the light. Later that night, I got a text from an unknown number. It read, "You can't keep it all to yourself forever. Be careful who you trust." I felt my chest tighten. I didn't reply. The next day, Emily showed up again, this time with paperwork. "I talked to a lawyer," she announced, setting a thick envelope on my table. "He says I'm entitled to a portion of the estate's valuables. The coin falls under that," I scoffed. "You're unbelievable." "Unbelievable or fair," she countered. "We're family, Clarissa. Don't turn this into a war." But it was already a war. The moment she left, I called my own lawyer, a calm, steady man named David Ross. After explaining the situation, he sighed. "You're in a tough spot. Legally, if the will names you as sole heir, the assets are yours. But if she can prove the coin predates the will's drafting or came from a family collection, she can challenge it." My heart sank. "What does that mean?" "It means she could drag this through court for years," he said plainly. "Or she might just be bluffing to make you settle." Either way, I was trapped. The stress began to eat at me. I barely slept, and every creak in the house made me jump. I even caught myself checking the locks twice every night. It wasn't just paranoia, it was instinct. Something told me this wasn't just about lawyers and money anymore. That feeling proved right when, a few nights later, I noticed a car parked across the street. Its engine was off, but its headlights flickered occasionally like someone was trying not to be noticed. I peeked through the curtains for nearly an hour, but the car didn't move. Finally, I stepped outside with my phone in hand, pretending to take out the trash. The moment I did, the car started up and drove off into the dark. My heart pounded. The next morning, I called Kara, hoping for some comfort. "You sound awful," she said. "You need to get away from that mess. Maybe take a break. Stay somewhere else for a while." I wanted to, but I couldn't leave. The coin was still in my possession, and something in me refused to abandon it. It wasn't just about money anymore, it was about answers. That afternoon, I went to the attic, searching through Grandma's things again, hoping to find some clue, a note, a record, anything that could explain where the coin came from. Hours passed as I sifted through boxes of letters and keepsakes. Finally, I found a small envelope tucked inside an old book of hymns. It was empty, but faintly marked with a red wax seal that had been broken. The imprint on the wax matched the crown symbol from the coin. I froze. What were the chances? Before I could process what I'd found, my phone buzzed again, this time with a voicemail notification. I pressed play. It was David Ross, my lawyer. His voice was tense. "Clarissa, I just got an urgent notice. Your cousin Emily filed a preliminary claim on the estate assets this morning. She's alleging you concealed family property. Call me as soon as you get this." My hands shook as I ended the call. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Emily had actually gone through with it. I sat down on the attic floor, surrounded by dust and memories, and whispered to the emptiness, "Why can't you just let me have this one thing, Emily?" But I had no idea that before the legal battle even began, someone would take matters into their own hands and the coin would vanish before my eyes. It happened 2 nights later. The memory of that evening still sends chills down my spine, as if the house itself knew something terrible was about to happen. The wind was strong, rattling the old window panes of Grandma's cottage, and the trees outside groaned under the weight of the storm rolling in. I'd spent most of the night sorting through paperwork from my lawyer, trying to stay one step ahead of Emily's legal claims. The coin sat beside me on the table, wrapped carefully in its velvet pouch, glinting faintly under the lamplight. Around midnight, my eyelids grew heavy, and I finally went to bed. I left the coin box locked in Grandma's old cedar chest, the same one she'd used for family heirlooms, and placed it at the foot of my bed. I remember glancing at it one last time before I turned off the light, comforted by the soft creak of the wood beneath me. But sometime during the night, I woke to a sound that didn't belong. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the creak of the old floorboards or the hum of the heater. It was softer, a faint rustling from upstairs. The attic? My first thought was that it was just the storm, but then I heard it again, a quick shuffle, like footsteps. My heart started racing. I sat up in bed, straining to listen. Silence. Then, a light thud, followed by the faint squeak of hinges. The attic door. I grabbed my phone and crept out of bed, barefoot. My heart hammering so hard I thought it might give me away. The hallway felt endless. Shadows stretching across the floor like long fingers. When I reached the base of the attic stairs, I hesitated. Should I call the police? Should I shout? My throat felt tight, and every instinct screamed at me to run, but I had to know. I slowly climbed the steps, one at a time, the wood groaning beneath me. When I reached the top, I flicked on the small light by the doorway and froze. The attic window was open, the curtains flapping violently in the wind. Rain blew in, soaking the wooden floorboards. Boxes were overturned, papers scattered everywhere. My breath caught in my throat when I saw the small space where the coin box had been stored empty. The box was gone. Panic surged through me. I ran downstairs, calling the police with shaking hands. I barely managed to get the words out. Someone broke into my house, they took something valuable, please hurry. When the officers arrived 20 minutes later, the storm had eased, leaving a damp chill in the air. They combed through the house, their flashlights sweeping over every corner. One of them, a calm man with kind eyes, asked, "Was anything else taken?" I shook my head numbly. "Just the coins. The box was locked in that chest by my bed." He inspected the chest, running his gloved hand along the edges. "There's no sign of forced entry here. Are you sure the house was locked?" "I'm sure," I said. "Every door, every window." He frowned. "Then whoever did this either had a key or knew where to look." The implication hit me like ice water. Someone who knew. Someone close. "Could it have been a relative?" he asked gently. "You mentioned a dispute over inheritance." I hesitated, thinking of Emily, of the way she'd glared at me on the porch that day. My throat tightened. "Maybe." The officer nodded sympathetically. "We'll file a report and alert nearby pawnshops and dealers. Rare coins like that aren't easy to sell quietly." But his words felt hollow. Whoever had taken them wasn't going to sell them at a pawnshop. They knew what they were worth and exactly how much I'd lost. After they left, I sat alone in the living room, the silence pressing down on me. The space felt emptier than it ever had before. The only thing left of the box was a faint square of dust where it had once rested. The next morning, I called my lawyer, barely able to keep my voice steady. "They're gone, David. All of them. The coin, everything." He was silent for a moment, then sighed. "Clarissa, listen to me carefully. File an insurance claim immediately, and don't tell anyone else what happened until the police have something concrete. If this gets out, people will come crawling out of the woodwork." But it was already too late for secrecy. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a notification. A friend had forwarded me a link to an online forum, one dedicated to rare coin collectors. I clicked it, my hands trembling. The headline stopped me cold. "Possible 1,794 pattern Liberty coin surfaces in Seattle collector group." Beneath it was a grainy photo of my coin. I would have recognized it anywhere. The same faint crown marking above Liberty's head, the same light wear near the rim. The post was anonymous. It said, "Recently acquired from a private sale. Seeking valuation offers." I felt my entire body go cold. Someone had stolen my coin, taken it across state lines, and was already trying to sell it. I immediately called the police to report the new lead, forwarding the link and screenshot. The officer promised to send it to their digital crimes division, but he warned it might take time to trace. "These sellers use VPNs and fake accounts," he explained. "It could take weeks." Weeks. I didn't have weeks. After I hung up, I sat on the floor beside Grandma's cedar chest, staring at the empty space where the coin had been. All the anger, fear, and disbelief boiled into one thought. Someone I trusted had done this. I could almost hear Grandma's voice in my head, calm, steady, patient. Clarissa, some treasures aren't meant to be easy to keep. I clenched my fists. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. Because whoever took those coins didn't just steal from me, they stole a piece of Grandma's legacy. And I was going to get it back, no matter what it cost me. I felt betrayed and furious. Whoever had broken into my home had done more than steal metal and silver. They'd taken a piece of my history, something sacred that tied me to Grandma. The photo online confirmed it without question. The faint crown. The slight chip on the lower rim. It was my coin. I called the police again. But their response was predictable. "We'll investigate the online listing, Miss Rivers," the officer assured me. "But these things take time. The seller could be using multiple layers of anonymity. Time was the one thing I didn't have. Every hour the coin stayed out there, it risked vanishing forever. I couldn't sit and wait while bureaucracy moved at its own pace. So, I did something completely out of character for me. I decided to take matters into my own hands. That evening, I joined the same coin forum using a fake name. I sent a private message to the anonymous poster, pretending to be a serious buyer. "Very interested in your 1794 Liberty," I wrote. "Can meet in person with cash." Hours passed before I got a reply. It was short and cautious. "Seattle. Tomorrow. Noon. Message for address when ready to deal. Seattle." My heart started pounding. That was only a few hours' drive from my town. It wasn't just close, it was deliberate. Whoever took the coin knew I'd find the post. Before dawn, I packed a small overnight bag, grabbed Grandma's photograph, and slipped into my car. The sky was still dark, the highway empty except for the occasional truck. The sound of the tires against the wet asphalt gave me time to think, too much time. I kept wondering who could have done it. Emily had motive, yes, but she wasn't bold enough to break into a house, unless she'd hired someone. When I reached Seattle around 11, I parked near a small cafe downtown and sent another message. "I'm here. Where should we meet?" The response came a few minutes later with an address. A narrow antique store off a quiet street called Kingsley Avenue. The moment I pulled up, something about the place gave me pause. The windows were dusty, the sign half faded. Kingsley Collectibles, rare coins, antiques, memorabilia. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The shop smelled of old leather and metal polish. A bell jingled as I entered, and a tall man behind the counter looked up from polishing a pocket watch. His graying beard and steady eyes gave him a calm, practiced demeanor. "Can I help you?" he asked. I hesitated. "I'm here about a coin someone posted online. They said this was the place." He studied me for a moment before nodding slowly. "You must be Lydia, then." That was the fake name I'd used. "Yeah, the young woman who brought it in said someone might show up to make an offer." My pulse spiked. "A woman?" "Red hair. Early 30s, he said, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Pretty, but nervous. She said it was part of her grandmother's estate." Emily. The confirmation hit me like a punch. I gripped the counter to steady myself. "Did she say her name?" He shook his head. "No. But I took a copy of her ID for my record's standard procedure." He glanced around, then leaned closer. Something felt off about her, to be honest. Said she needed cash fast, but when I asked for provenance papers, she got defensive. I forced a calm smile. "She wasn't authorized to sell that coin. It's stolen from me. Can I see the ID she gave you?" He hesitated, then finally nodded. "If it's really stolen, I want no part of it." He disappeared into a back room and returned with a small folder. Inside was a photocopy of an ID, Emily's face, staring back at me. My chest tightened as relief and anger collided inside me. "Do you still have the coin?" I asked quickly. He nodded toward a locked case behind him. "I didn't put it on display. Something told me to wait until I could verify it." I almost cried from sheer gratitude. "Please," I said. "Can I take it? I have the police report to prove it's mine." He studied me for a long moment, then sighed. "All right, show me." I pulled the folded report from my purse, the ink slightly smudged from my anxious hands. He examined it carefully before unlocking the case and handing me the velvet pouch. The moment I felt its weight in my palm, a flood of emotion rushed through me: relief, exhaustion, triumph. "Thank you," I whispered. "Just promise me one thing," he said. "Keep it safe, and if that woman shows up again, tell her I called the cops." "I will," I said. "You've done more than you know." As I stepped out into the cold Seattle air, I clutched the pouch tightly against my chest. I didn't feel victorious, just drained. The city noises around me faded into the background as I realized what had just happened. My cousin had stolen from me, lied, and tried to profit off Grandma's memory. On the drive home, the rain started again, blurring the lights of the highway. I wanted to call the police and report everything immediately, but part of me hesitated. Family or not, Emily had crossed a line, but did I really want her arrested? When I finally got home, the decision was made for me. A white envelope was waiting on my doorstep, the same kind as before. My stomach dropped as I opened it. This one wasn't from Richard Brenner. It was from a law firm. Inside was a formal notice. "You are hereby instructed to cease and desist from withholding shared property of the late Margaret Rivers estate. Miss Emily Dawes is entitled to 50% of all assets, including but not limited to the coin collection." I read it twice, barely breathing. She'd actually hired a lawyer after stealing from me. Anger surged through me like fire. I slammed the door shut and leaned against it, the velvet pouch still in my grip. Emily hadn't just betrayed me once. She was declaring war, and I was about to fight back with everything I had. I never imagined family could turn into enemies overnight. But that's exactly what Emily had become: an enemy wearing a familiar face. The day I got that cease and desist letter, I knew she wasn't bluffing anymore. She wanted the coin, the inheritance, the house, everything Grandma had entrusted to me. The next morning, I drove straight to my lawyer's office, letter in hand. David Ross looked it over with his usual calm but serious expression. "Well," he said finally, "this is more aggressive than I expected. She's formally alleging that you concealed assets belonging to the shared estate." I leaned forward, trying to steady my shaking hands. "That's not true. The will names me as the sole heir. Everything in Grandma's cottage was left to me." He nodded. "I know. But she's trying to argue that the coin predates the will, meaning it was part of a family collection that should have been divided. It's weak legally, but not impossible to push through court. So what happens now?" He sighed. "If she files a claim, we'll have to respond. I'll prepare the paperwork. In the meantime, don't speak to her, and don't post or mention anything publicly. The last thing we need is her twisting your words." I agreed, though the thought of staying quiet while Emily smeared my name made my stomach turn. Over the next week, everything in my life felt consumed by legal tension. I'd come home to thick envelopes full of paperwork and sleepless nights filled with dread. My friends tried to console me, but it was hard to explain how it felt being attacked by your own blood over something you didn't even know you had 6 months ago. Dr. Pennington called during that week, too. His voice was measured, professional as always. "Miss Rivers, I heard about your unfortunate situation," he said. "Please remember that the authentication documents are in your name only. Regardless of any claims, the record of ownership favors you." That should have comforted me, but it didn't. I didn't trust anyone in that world anymore, not after how easily information had spread before. "Still," he added, "I would advise proceeding with the auction. It may be your best move legally. Once the sale is complete and funds are distributed, the matter becomes harder to contest." I paused. "You think I should sell it?" "Yes," he said simply, "while it's still in your possession and under your control." After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the velvet pouch. The coin gleamed faintly in the afternoon light. Selling it felt wrong, like letting go of Grandma all over again, but maybe it was the only way to protect what she'd left me. A few days later, my lawyer called with updates. "Emily's attorney filed a preliminary injunction," he said. "They're requesting the court to freeze the coin as a disputed asset." I felt my blood run cold. "Freeze it? What does that mean?" It means you can't move, sell, or alter the item until the case is resolved. No, I whispered. She can't do that. She can try, he said. But the hearing's next week. If we can prove ownership under the will, the judge will likely dismiss her claim. Just be prepared for a fight. The idea of standing in a courtroom across from my cousin, someone I'd once shared birthdays, holidays, and secrets with, made me sick. But I didn't have a choice. When the court date arrived, I sat quietly beside David as Emily entered the room. She looked composed, confident, dressed in sharp black with a folder tucked neatly under her arm. She didn't even look at me. Her lawyer, a polished man with slicked-back hair, stood and began his argument. My client asserts that the coin in question is part of a historical collection passed down through the Rivers family for generations. It was not individually specified in the will, and therefore constitutes shared property under Oregon state inheritance law. David stood next, firm but calm. The will clearly grants full ownership of the estate, including all contents of the residence, to Miss Clarissa Rivers. There is no evidence this item was ever intended to be shared or divided. The judge listened quietly, flipping through documents. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear the rest. When it was finally over, the judge looked up and said, "We'll schedule a formal review after verification of the coin's registration and insurance documentation." Postponed. No decision, just more waiting. As Emily and her lawyer left the courtroom, she finally turned and gave me a small, smug smile. It was a look that said, "I'm not done with you yet." That night, I called Dr. Pennington again. "Let's do it," I said quietly. "Let's auction the coin." He didn't sound surprised. "A wise choice, Miss Rivers. The auction date is open next month, but if you wish, I can expedite it to next week. The sooner it's sold, the sooner this nightmare ends." I agreed. The next few days passed in a blur. I signed the final documents, arranged security transport for the coin, and watched as they sealed it inside a protective case for the upcoming auction. The sight of it leaving my home filled me with both relief and grief, as if I was closing the final chapter of Grandma's legacy. When I told Emily about the auction through my lawyer, she exploded. Her attorney sent an email within hours. "This action will not stand. We intend to contest the sale in court." But it didn't matter. The date was set. The Heritage Auction House would host the sale in front of international collectors. That night, I stood alone in the cottage, staring at the empty cedar chest one last time. Grandma's words echoed in my mind, "Don't throw away that box, Clarissa. Promise me that." I whispered back into the silence. "I kept it, Grandma. I really did." And yet, as the wind howled outside and the shadows danced against the walls, I couldn't shake the feeling that the auction wouldn't be the end of anything. Because when money and blood mix, the storm doesn't end with a gavel, it begins there. The auction house was buzzing with energy. The morning of the event, I could feel the air itself charged with anticipation. Collectors from all over the country had gathered, their whispers rippling through the grand hall like static. The walls gleamed with soft golden light, the glass cases shone, and the sound of polished shoes on marble echoed like the heartbeat of the place. I stood in the corner near the entrance, trying to blend in. My lawyer, David, stood beside me, speaking quietly to Dr. Pennington, who looked uncharacteristically nervous. Every time I caught his eye, he offered me a polite, reassuring smile, but something about the stiffness in his posture told me there was more happening behind the scenes than I knew. The coin, Grandma's coin, sat on display at the front of the room inside a velvet-lined glass case. Under the spotlight, it glowed like a star. It was strange seeing it like that, no longer hidden in a dusty attic or locked in a cedar chest, but instead on display before strangers who saw it only as currency, not legacy. David leaned close and whispered, "Once the hammer falls, the funds go into escrow until the court finalizes Emily's claim. Don't worry, that's standard procedure." I nodded weakly, barely hearing him. My thoughts drifted between pride and guilt. Grandma's voice echoed faintly in my head. "These coins will take care of you someday, Clarissa." The auctioneer, a tall man in a deep blue suit, took the podium. His voice was calm but carried easily across the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today for this extraordinary event. We are proud to present Lot 47, the 1794 Liberty pattern coin, recently authenticated and believed to be the only surviving prototype of its kind. A murmur swept through the audience. The room leaned forward collectively. The auctioneer continued. This coin represents not just a piece of American history, but the story of a nation's birth, the earliest design of our monetary identity. He paused, smiling confidently. We'll begin the bidding at $100,000. The first paddle rose instantly. Then another. Then 5. More. The sound of the gavel tapping rhythmically quickened my pulse. 150,000, the auctioneer called. 200. 250. 300,000. The room seemed to heat with the tension. My hands trembled as I clutched the side of my chair. Every shout, every new bid sent my heart higher. 400,000. Gasps rippled through the audience. Cameras clicked from the back rows. Dr. Pennington leaned toward me and whispered, "You're witnessing history, Miss Rivers. This is what your grandmother preserved." But I could barely hear him. My breath came shallow, my chest tight. I thought of Emily, probably sitting somewhere stewing in anger that this moment wasn't hers. I thought of all the nights I'd sat awake, staring at that coin under dim light, wondering if it meant anything at all. 500,000! The auctioneer shouted, grinning as the energy in the room reached a fever pitch. Do I hear 550? A man in a dark suit raised his paddle, then another bidder countered, then another. 600,000! 650! The audience began clapping lightly, unable to contain the thrill of watching numbers climb so high. I could feel tears prickling at the corners of my eyes, not from greed, but disbelief. For years, I'd felt ordinary, invisible, like my life would always be small and predictable. And yet here I was, watching a piece of my grandmother's past, my past, command the kind of attention that people only dream about. 700,000. My knees went weak. I could barely keep standing. David gripped my arm gently, whispering, "Steady, Clarissa. Almost there." 750,000. 800,000. The room was silent except for the rhythmic voice of the auctioneer. Then, suddenly, he paused. A voice from the back of the room called out clearly, $1 million. Gasps filled the hall. The crowd erupted into murmurs, heads turning to locate the bidder. I craned my neck but couldn't see who it was. The man stood in the shadowed back corner, his paddle raised, face obscured by the dim lighting. The auctioneer froze for a moment, then broke into a stunned smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a bid of $1 million. The crowd buzzed with excitement, camera flashes strobing across the room. He called out, "Do I hear 1,050,000? 1 million? Going once?" No one moved. The tension was palpable. Going twice. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Sold. The gavel struck the podium with a sharp crack that echoed through the hall. Sold for $1 million! Applause erupted, thundering against the high ceilings. People stood to their feet, clapping and cheering as if they'd just witnessed a miracle. I stood frozen, tears spilling freely now. David squeezed my shoulder. "You did it," he said softly. "It's over." But I wasn't sure it was. Because while everyone else celebrated, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Dr. Pennington approached me, his face pale but smiling. "Congratulations, Miss Rivers. You've made history today." "Who was the buyer?" I asked, my voice trembling. He hesitated just a fraction too long. "An anonymous bidder. They requested confidentiality." Anonymous. The word hit me like a warning bell. There was something too familiar about it, the same secrecy that had haunted me since the beginning. As the applause faded and people began to disperse, I caught a glimpse of movement near the back exit, a figure walking swiftly out of the room. Coat collar raised, moving with purpose. For a moment, as the light hit her hair, I thought I saw a glint of red. Emily. My breath caught. Could it be? Was she the one who'd bid? Or was she there to start another fight? I started toward the door, but David stopped me gently. "Leave it, Clarissa. You've won. Don't ruin this moment." I forced a nod, though every instinct in me screamed otherwise. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of the story, it was the calm before something much darker. Ladies and gentlemen, we've just confirmed an anonymous bidder has offered $1 million, the auctioneer declared. The sound of his voice seemed to hang in the air, echoing through the grand hall like the toll of a church bell. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the entire room erupted in gasps and whispers, the hum of disbelief swelling like a wave. I stood frozen, barely breathing, as flashes from cameras burst like lightning across the room. People craned their necks, searching for the mysterious buyer who had just dropped a fortune on a coin once dismissed as junk. $1 million, I whispered to myself, hardly able to process it. David leaned toward me, his voice a low murmur. Clarissa, you just made history. This is a record-breaking sale for a privately discovered prototype. I didn't respond. My mind was spinning too fast. The applause around me faded into a dull roar as I stared at the auctioneer raising the gavel for the final strike. Going once, going twice, SOL'd. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed in my chest. Applause thundered through the hall. Strangers clapped, smiled, even cheered. A few came forward to congratulate me, but their words blurred together, lost beneath the pounding of my pulse. For so long, that coin had been nothing but a mystery, a dusty piece of metal tucked away in Grandma's attic, and now it had changed everything. Dr. Pennington approached, his face glowing with satisfaction. Miss Rivers, congratulations. The sale was extraordinary. You should be very proud. I swallowed hard, forcing a shaky smile. Thank you. I still can't believe this is happening. He gave a knowing nod. It's moments like this that remind us why history matters. You've given new life to a piece of America's past. Before I could respond, one of his assistants came rushing up, whispering something urgently into his ear. His expression shifted subtly, a flicker of surprise, maybe even concern before he masked it behind another polite smile. If you'll excuse me for a moment, he said quickly, stepping away toward the stage. I turned to David. What was that about? He shrugged, though his eyes followed Pennington with faint suspicion. Could be routine. A sale like this attracts attention: paperwork, press, buyers who need verification. Still, something in my gut told me otherwise. Moments later, Dr. Pennington returned, holding a clipboard. Everything's confirmed, he said smoothly. Funds will be transferred to your escrow account within 72 hours. Once that's done, the money will be legally yours, pending the outcome of your cousin's claim. 72 hours, I repeated. That soon? He nodded. The buyer was quite insistent. That phrasing, quite insistent, caught my attention. I opened my mouth to ask more, but before I could, the auctioneer's assistant approached with a sealed envelope. For Miss Rivers, she said, handing it to me. My name was written in neat, looping handwriting on the front. I frowned, glancing between the two men. What's this, Doctor? Pennington looked just as puzzled. We haven't issued any documents yet. I tore open the envelope and a small folded note fell out. Inside, in the same handwriting, were just 5 words. It's not over, be careful. There was no signature, no initials, nothing. But I didn't need one. I recognized the style of the handwriting immediately. Richard Brenner. My chest tightened. He'd warned me before about trusting the auction house. What was he trying to tell me now? That the sale wasn't legitimate? That the buyer wasn't who they said they were? I tucked the note into my purse and forced a polite smile when reporters approached. Flashbulbs went off, and microphones were thrust in my face. Miss Rivers, how does it feel to be a millionaire overnight? One of them asked. I blinked, my voice hollow. It doesn't feel real, I said truthfully. My grandmother always told me to hold on to things that mattered. I guess she was right. David stepped in to handle the press after that, guiding me through interviews and congratulatory handshakes. But my thoughts were miles away. Even as people cheered and patted my back, a creeping unease began to take root. When the event finally ended and I was escorted to the car waiting out front, I caught sight of a familiar figure standing across the street, red hair catching in the fading light. Emily, she was watching me. Our eyes met for just a second before she turned and disappeared into the crowd. My stomach dropped. What was she doing here? She hadn't been invited. David noticed my expression. You okay? I just saw Emily, I whispered. Across the street. He turned sharply, scanning the area. You're sure? Yes. She was there. Watching. He frowned, lowering his voice. Let's get you back to the hotel. We'll sort everything out in the morning. The drive felt endless. Every passing shadow on the road made me flinch. When we finally reached the hotel, I barely made it to my room before collapsing onto the bed. My phone buzzed non-stop congratulations. Media requests, messages from old acquaintances suddenly remembering my name. I ignored them all. I pulled out the note again, tracing the words with my thumb. It's not over. Be careful. The next morning, I woke to a call from Dr. Pennington. His voice sounded unusually tense. Miss Rivers, there's been a complication. My heart skipped. What kind of complication? There's been an issue verifying the buyer's information. The funds haven't been transferred yet. I sat up, adrenaline flooding my veins. What do you mean, issue? You said everything was confirmed. He sighed. We're looking into it, but it seems the bidder used an offshore proxy account. The identity remains unclear. Anonymous. Richard's warning suddenly made horrifying sense. I gripped the phone tighter. You mean you don't know who just bought my grandmother's coin? A long pause. Then, quietly, not yet. I felt sick. The air in the room seemed to thicken, pressing against my chest. Find out, I whispered. Find out who it was, because I have a feeling this isn't about money anymore. I hung up and sat in the dim silence of the hotel room, staring at the note again, my pulse quick and unsteady. Whoever bought that coin wasn't a stranger, and deep down I already knew whose hands it had really fallen into. A week after the auction, I got a call from the auction house. I'd been waiting for confirmation that the funds had cleared, but instead of celebration, what I heard sent my heart into freefall. Doctor. Pennington's voice was sharp, controlled, but beneath it, I could hear something else. Panic. Miss Rivers, he began carefully. We have a situation. What kind of situation? He hesitated. Someone attempted to claim your payout yesterday morning using falsified documents. They presented an ID in your name, your signature, even an exact copy of the escrow form. If our staff hadn't double-checked the authentication code, the payment would have gone through. I went cold. You're saying someone tried to steal the $1 million? Yes, he said grimly. The authorities have already been notified. They're reviewing security footage now. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear, my pulse pounding. Do you know who it was? Not yet, he admitted. But the forgery was disturbingly accurate. Whoever did it had access to documents that should have been private. My throat felt dry. Only a handful of people had those documents. Me, my lawyer, and my breath caught Emily. After hanging up, I called David immediately and told him everything. He listened quietly before saying what I already feared. Clarissa, if the forgery used your ID and signature, it's someone who knows you personally or someone with access to your legal files. And from what you've told me, that narrows it down. Emily, I said bitterly, it has to be her. He didn't argue. We'll let the police confirm it, but yes, it's likely. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in Grandma's old chair by the fireplace, staring at the fading embers, trying to understand how my own cousin could fall so far. This wasn't the sisterly rivalry we'd grown up with. This was betrayal calculated and cold. By morning, the police called. An officer named Ruiz spoke calmly but firmly. Miss Rivers, we've reviewed the footage from the auction house. The person who attempted to claim your payment was indeed a woman matching your cousin's description. I closed my eyes. Did she use her real name? No, he said. She presented forged credentials as Clarissa Rivers, but we've traced the car she used to a rental registered under Emily Dawes. There it was, the final proof. The officer continued. We're issuing a warrant for questioning. You'll be contacted once she's in custody. When I hung up, the weight of it all crashed over me. Relief, fury, heartbreak, all tangled into one. I wanted to scream, to demand why she'd done it. But deep down, I already knew. Emily had never been satisfied with what she had. She saw life as a competition, and this time, she'd gone too far. A few days later, I got another call, this time from David. "They've picked her up," he said quietly. She confessed. I froze. "She admitted it?" He sighed. "Yes. She said she just wanted what she thought was fair, that she wasn't trying to hurt you, only to even the scales. The DA is reviewing charges for fraud and attempted identity theft." I didn't know what to say. My heart ached, not with anger anymore, but with a deep sadness. I thought of the little girls we'd once been playing in Grandma's garden, braiding each other's hair, promising to always have each other's backs. And now, she'd tried to destroy me over money. The media caught wind of it within a day. Headlines popped up online. $1 million coin sale sparks family feud. Harris betrayed by cousin in auction scandal. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing, but I ignored every call. The noise of the world meant nothing compared to the quiet pain inside me. Later that week, I drove out to Grandma's cottage, the place where all this had begun. The late afternoon sun slanted through the windows, turning the dust motes to gold. I wandered from room to room, my fingers tracing the edges of furniture, the walls, the old photographs still hanging in their frames. When I reached the attic, I hesitated. The smell of cedar and age greeted me like an old friend. I knelt where the coin box had once sat, remembering that first night I'd opened it before the greed, before the chaos. Tears welled up in my eyes. "Why did you leave this for me, Grandma?" I whispered into the silence. "You must have known what it would cause." I stayed like that for a long time, lost in the memories, until something caught my eye, a faint glint beneath one of the floorboards. I frowned, reaching down to pry it loose. Beneath the plank was a small compartment I'd never noticed before. Inside was a single folded piece of paper. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was Grandma's handwriting, delicate, looping, unmistakable. The note read, "If you're reading this, Clarissa, you've found the truth. The coin was never just about value. It was a test of trust, of love, of what truly matters. I hoped it would bring our family together, not tear it apart. Whatever happens next, remember, forgiveness is worth more than gold." I covered my mouth, tears spilling freely. Grandma had understood human nature better than anyone. She'd seen this coming, the envy, the greed, the choices we'd make when tested. By the time I left the attic, my heart felt lighter. Emily had made her choices, but I knew holding on to bitterness wouldn't heal anything. The next morning, I wrote her a letter, short, honest, and final. "I forgive you, Emily. But I can't walk this road with you anymore. I hope someday you understand what Grandma was really trying to teach us." I sealed it and left it with her lawyer. That evening, as I sat by the window watching the last light fade, my phone buzzed again, another message from Dr. Pennington. "Funds confirmed. Transfer completed." The $1 million were finally mine, but as I stared at the notification, it felt strangely hollow. Because no amount of money could ever buy back what family had broken, or the innocence we'd lost trying to find what was already priceless. While cleaning the attic one last time, I found a hidden drawer under the floorboards. It had been days since the chaos ended. Emily's confession, the court dismissing her claim, the funds finally released into my account. The world saw it as a victory, but I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty. The cottage was quiet again, the way Grandma had always kept it, and I came there often just to breathe in the silence and remember who I was before all of this began. The attic, once a place of dust and shadows, now felt almost sacred. Every box, every photo, every trinket had meaning. Grandma's presence lingered there, not in a haunting way, but in a comforting one, like the smell of lavender and cedar that never seemed to fade. I decided to do a final deep clean before moving forward with renovations. As I lifted the same floorboard where I'd hidden the coins for safekeeping, I noticed something I'd somehow missed before, a thin, uneven line running across one of the corner boards. I pressed against it lightly, and to my surprise, it gave way. Beneath it was a small drawer, perfectly hidden within the beam. Inside lay a faded velvet envelope and a folded letter tied with a silver ribbon. My breath caught as I recognized the handwriting on the outside. Grandma's graceful script, looping and neat, even after all those years. The letter was addressed to me. I sat cross-legged on the attic floor and untied the ribbon, unfolding the paper slowly. The ink was faded but still legible, every word written with care. My dearest Clarissa, if you are reading this, it means you've found the coins and perhaps, by now, you've learned their value. But more importantly, you've seen how people can change when they think they've found something precious. I want you to understand why I kept them, and why I chose to leave them to you. I swallowed hard, my eyes already blurring with tears. These coins were given to me by your grandfather before he passed. He told me they were valuable, yes, but not because of money. He said they carried stories, lives, and lessons in their metal. I promised him I would keep them safe until the time came when someone in our family truly understood their worth. I believed that person would be you. The words hit me like a soft, steady wave. Grandma had always seen something in me, patience, maybe, or curiosity, but I'd never thought she meant this literally. If the coins have brought hardship, the letter continued, remember that hardship reveals truth. Money can expose greed, but it can also teach gratitude. Forgive those who falter, my love. Family isn't about inheritance, it's about legacy. Protect the goodness in your heart, even when others lose theirs. By the time I finished reading, I was crying openly. I pressed the letter to my chest, letting the paper soak in my tears. She had known everything that would happen, not the details, perhaps, but the pattern. The test of love and loyalty. When I finally looked inside the velvet envelope, I froze. There, wrapped in delicate tissue, were 2 more coins. They were smaller than the Liberty pattern coin, thinner and worn by centuries, but their surfaces shimmered with an almost iridescent patina. They didn't look American. One bore the faint image of a crowned lion, the other a sunburst surrounded by symbols I didn't recognize. I turned them over carefully. Each had a small engraving near the edge, the initials ER, my grandfather's name, Elias Rivers. I sat there for a long time, staring at them in the sunlight filtering through the attic window. These weren't meant for sale, I realized. These were personal keepsakes, maybe from his travels or gifts he'd received long before I was born. Their worth wasn't in auctions or bids but in meaning. Part of me wondered if I should get them appraised, but another part of me already knew what Grandma would say. Some things aren't meant to be priced, only protected. So I decided not to. I tucked the coins back into their envelope and placed them inside Grandma's letterbox, sealing it shut. Then I placed the box back under the floorboard where it had been hidden, a secret resting place for the last pieces of our family's story. As I stood up, a calm warmth spread through me, the kind that comes only when something heavy finally lifts off your chest. The greed, the fights, the betrayal, they no longer mattered. The coin had done its work. It had revealed the truth, just as Grandma had intended. When I left the attic that evening, I took one last look at the empty corner where the wooden box once sat. The setting sun cast golden light across the floor, and for a fleeting moment, I could almost see Grandma's silhouette there, her soft smile, her patient eyes watching me. I whispered, "You were right, Grandma. Value isn't always what you can count, it's what you carry." Downstairs, I brewed a cup of tea and sat by the window, listening to the quiet hum of crickets outside. For the first time in months, I felt peace. The inheritance hadn't made me rich, it had made me wise. Later that night, as I wrote in my journal, I sealed the entry with the same words Grandma had written to me. Forgiveness is worth more than gold. And deep down, I knew that would be the legacy I carried forward, not the $1 million, not the fame, but the lesson that had taken generations to teach. Still, as I drifted off to sleep that night, one thought lingered in the back of my mind: if Grandma hid those 2 coins for me to find, what other secrets might still be waiting beneath this old cottage's floors? It's been months since the auction, and my life is unrecognizable. The storm that once surrounded the coin, the inheritance, and the betrayal has finally settled into something like calm. The $1 million sale changed everything, yes, but not in the way people think. Money might have brought security, but the real change happened somewhere quieter, deeper inside me. I used part of the money to restore Grandma's cottage. I couldn't bear to sell it. It felt like a part of her was still there, in every creak of the floorboards, every lavender-scented breeze that drifted through the windows. I hired local craftsmen to repair the roof, polish the woodwork, and rebuild the attic exactly as it had been, minus the pain it once held. The rest of the money, I invested carefully, but I made one important decision: to use a portion to give back. Grandma always believed in history, in stories passed down through generations. So, in her name, I established a small local foundation, the Rivers Heritage Trust. Its mission is simple: to help families evaluate and preserve their heirlooms, not for profit but for memory. I partnered with historians, archivists, and appraisers who value truth over greed. We help people discover what's meaningful in their attics, just as I once did, but without letting money poison the story. The first day our office opened, a woman came in carrying an old wooden box, not so different from Grandma's. Inside were faded photographs, a cracked pocket watch, and a single silver coin. She said, "I don't care if it's worth anything. I just want to know who it belonged to." I smiled, because I understood completely. Those moments, seeing people connect with their past instead of chasing wealth, that's when I feel closest to Grandma. Emily, on the other hand, has walked a harder road. After her arrest, she entered a rehabilitation and counseling program as part of a plea deal. The charges were reduced after I wrote a statement requesting leniency. When she called me months later, her voice was softer, almost unrecognizable. "Why did you do that?" she asked quietly. "Why didn't you let them send me to prison?" I told her the truth. "Because Grandma would have forgiven you. And because I need peace more than revenge." There was silence for a long time, and then she whispered, "I'm sorry, Clarissa. It wasn't enough to erase everything that happened, but it was a start. We still don't talk often. Trust isn't something you rebuild overnight, but for the first time, it feels possible. Sometimes, when I visit Grandma's grave, I bring fresh lavender from the garden she once tended. I tell her everything about the foundation, about Emily, about the peace that's finally found me. The wind always seems to stir when I speak, as if she's answering in her quiet, patient way. One evening, I returned to the cottage after a long day at the foundation. The sunset painted the sky in gold and rose, the same colors that had lit the attic window the day I first found the box. I brewed a cup of tea, sat in Grandma's rocking chair, and opened the journal I'd been keeping since everything began. Flipping through the pages, I saw my journey laid bare: fear, anger, heartbreak, discovery. I'd written every emotion, every doubt, every victory. And now, for the first time, I reached the end of the notebook. I pressed my pen against the page and wrote my final entry. I thought the coins were the treasure, but it turns out the real treasure was what they revealed: who I could become when tested, what love truly means, and how forgiveness can heal even the deepest wounds. Grandma's coins may have been made of silver and gold, but the lessons they taught me were priceless. I closed the book and placed it on the mantel beside Grandma's photograph. The same photo that had sat there my entire childhood, her smiling, eyes warm, holding a teacup in the garden. As night settled over the valley, I walked outside and looked up at the stars. The air was cool, crisp, alive with the faint hum of crickets. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. The world felt vast and quiet, just as it had the night I found the coin. I realized then that I wasn't the same woman anymore. I wasn't the scared, uncertain person who had doubted her worth. I'd faced greed, betrayal, loss, and I'd come out stronger, kinder, and freer. I thought about those 2 small coins still hidden under the attic floorboards, Grandma's final secret. Sometimes I wonder if I should bring them out, have them appraised, tell their story to the world. But every time I think about it, I hear Grandma's voice again. Not everything valuable needs to be sold. Some things are meant to be kept close to the heart. So I leave them where they are, tucked away, safe. A reminder that legacy doesn't always have to shine in public to have worth. As I stood there under the stars, the faint echo of the auctioneer's voice returned to me: "Sold for $1 million. But now, it no longer sounded like triumph. It sounded like closure. I smiled, whispering into the night, "You were right, Grandma. They mocked my old coins once, but in the end, they taught me what true worth really means." The wind rustled through the trees, soft and gentle, almost like an answer. The kind Grandma used to give when she didn't need words to be understood. And with that, I went back inside, closed the door behind me, and felt, at last, like the story had found its ending. Because they mocked my old coins once, but now they remind me that true worth is never what it seems.